I felt like Jason fucking Bourne when I was just going through life, like scanning.
How did some of this pain and trauma manifest physically for you?
When I was growing up, I was morbidly obese. I was bullied. Even teachers would bully me. That led into college and getting Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's, brain tumors, discs replaced in my neck. My body was completely breaking down from me hating myself.
How did you heal?
I'm kind of known in the biohacking space, but all the biohacks that I learned were just keeping me alive. And some of these biohackers, if I'm being flat out honest, do not look very healthy. And there's people that are doing zero biohacking that live in these blue zones that are 100 plus years old, drinking wine, smoking cigars, but they have deep relationships. They have purpose. Psychosomatic is very powerful. When love enters in, epigenetically, you are shifting. When people do plant medicine, there's some great statistics around like 80% reduction in things like alcohol, gambling, and connection to source, friends, etc. goes way up. They're more in a parasympathetic nervous system. It was the same for me. My first journey, I had a massive pivot. It's only when you drop into parasympathetic that you can have that restoration. I can give you all the supplements in the world. If you're in ultra sympathetic states, you're not going to be utilizing them. If you're in a toxic environment, that needs to change first. Legacy means everything to me, and like having purpose for the rest of my life means everything. And the facilitation work I've done is fucking powerful. And the work I've done in myself, I would not be alive without it.
Yeah, you didn't have an easy go of it. I would say maybe an understatement, but through that, through a lot of that pain, there were a lot of gifts. And you had just, again, like we all have our own go at it. Yours was particularly challenging, it seemed like.
It was. I feel like I was the baby. I had two older brothers, and I was very empathic. And I wonder like how empathic I was, or was my nervous system trained because I was in a chaotic, abusive environment to be attuned to be hypervigilant, be acutely aware of even minute changes in body language,
really,
in vocal tone. I always wanted to please, to create ease. That was who I was. I was the baby, so I was the focus. I was also my dad's quote unquote real biological child, where my other two brothers were stepbrothers. And essentially, I hate to think of it this way, but maybe, like baggage with my mom.
Yep.
So they weren't treated the same. And
you noticed that.
It was brutal.
How much
But
older?
I also like that. I had regret about that. I had guilt about that I wasn't mistreated like they were. But at the same time, it's taken years and years and years of work to realize that I had a different stress, that I was responsible for how the whole house felt, because everyone focused on me, and I had the ability to calm everyone.
Jesus.
So I was at age 0 on trained to somehow try and bring calm to a chaotic home. And so that empathy, I'm not going to take it as some, weakness and people pleasing and all those kinds of things. I am going to take it as a superpower now. I'm very trained to sense someone's aura, their energy, how they're feeling. People know that about me. And there's people that will reject me because I'm a deeper kind of dude.
Mm-hmm.
But then those same people, when shit's going down, seek me out.
Yeah.
I get people that, only call me when stuff's going really wrong in their lives because they know, they sense it. And that's okay. But yeah, that's, but at the same time, everyone has their journey.
Mm-hmm.
My father, I've journeyed on that. My father was abused by an alcoholic veteran. His wife died of cancer early on. He, saw numerous deaths in World War II. Lived in poverty, and that's what in a trailer home, and that's what my father was raised in. My father was already in the Navy at 17, and kind of followed down that path. And there's suffering everywhere. So I try not to, For Agreement style. That book radically changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take anything personal. Everyone is on their own journey. And it's true. Like we're all doing the best with what we have. And it really is true.
It really is.
Like when you journey on that, you see that. Like I saw on my last journey with Dr. Stephen Young, who we were talking about, who I'm going to get on the show.
Hell yeah.
I was getting held by God, and then I watched my father as a child get held by God, and my mother as a child get held by God. And I saw them as children instead of like beings that were responsible for my life. I saw them as their own beings that had their own journey, that were once children too. And God loved them too. And to like shift on that was so powerful for me, to like absolutely 1000% forgive everything.
Damn. Very easy to forget. I like the way you put that. My parents, they've always been responsible for me for as long as I've been alive. I think even to this day, they feel I'm still their son, right? Even though I'm pretty self-sufficient now. I had a similar type of experience. It wasn't on plant medicine, but I was doing like an exercise, and it was to basically what you said, like really experience your parents as babies, and like how would you treat them, if they were sitting alone in the corner and were scared, what would you do? And it was like, and what would you do for yourself? How do we care for ourselves? Where, I think most of us are so quick to beat ourselves up about things and to be really harsh critics on some of the choices we make and kind of how we show up or don't show up. And then we forget that we too are that little child, that's inside of us. And I mean, oftentimes for me, when I'm a bit out of sorts, that's the one who's running the show. Right.
Exactly. And like one of the things, actually, another thing that was key with Dr. Stephen Young is like I journeyed, he had a recording that we listened to going into the journey on the feminine. And this was very recently that I figured out that I had a wound, a massive wound around my mother. I always was focused on my father in this situation. I hated women because my mother didn't protect us. And I like, when it hit me in a journey, I was like, oh my God. And again, when I saw my mother as a child and realized that she had been abused, she had a very abusive home growing up, as well as an abusive ex-husband. to realize that's why I was never loving or trusting women, including my ex-wife and other girls I had dated, everyone essentially up until my fiance currently, Hannah. When I healed this wound, I had a severe wound against women, just not trusting or believing, thinking they're going to use me, abandon me, hurt me. I can't trust them. And that's a deep relationship. Like when you believe your mom isn't someone that's going to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
I just never even thought to think that.
Damn. So you have this awareness though, right? In ceremony, and you and I both know it's not healed at that moment. So
Yeah.
what did it take from that kind of point of awareness until where you are today, where you feel like you've healed it?
I've really bridged the gap by healing these relationships by reaching out to my parents, calling them, spending time with them, realizing again that they're their own people, that they desperately want a deeper relationship with me. And once you forgive and you see them as, again, people that are just on their own journey and people that shouldn't be held to what they potentially did years and years and years ago. People are allowed to evolve and change. You shouldn't hold them, chain them down to this memory and keep reliving the memory. You can move on, they can move on. If you can change, if you can learn, let them. Stop treating them like that. And I started treating them and talking to them like the people that I envisioned I wanted them to be. And they started rising to that. Like instead of getting like the fear-based texts of the world is ending and, which I get. And actually a friend of mine told me, you can shift on that and think they're sending you those things because they love you. They want you to be safe. And now every time I get something fear-based from anyone, I'm like, wow, maybe they just want me to be safe. But I'd always send back to them, something along the lines of, how's your day? Like what were you eating? Like what's the weather outside? Like, is it beautiful? And it's shifted the way they respond and interact with me. And now they think of me instead of as someone that is a weight of the past, as someone that's enlightening their future.
And so they've felt that about the past, is that it's tough for them to look back on that.
Yeah, they were always wanting grandchildren or new relationships where they could be new.
Yeah.
So I'm giving them that relationship.
Yeah.
By showing up new, they can show up new too.
And what about your stepbrothers?
Same thing. Like the same with them. I saw them in a different light in these journeys of they were protectors. They were my big brothers. Even though I got beat up by them a lot, there was a lot that they sensed. There was a lot that they were dealing with. And I started realizing that, they ran away, they got kicked out, but they always stayed near me. Even at 14, even at 16, they were always living near me. And we would get together every single weekend and go see a movie. Sometimes they were broke. I remember my brother was flat broke and he got me a snowboard for Christmas.
No shit.
Because he knew I wanted to learn snowboarding and he did not have money to get that, but it's like one of those things that now when I was in the journey space, I was crying about how loving a gift that is.
Oh yeah.
When you're broke, when you're scared, when you're not even 18 years old, and to do that, It's incredible.
Yeah.
That's so loving. And none of us had the tools. But like when you can look at some things like that, you can truly see love.
How did some of this pain and trauma kind of manifest physically for you? This is a bit of a leading question because I know it's a bit of a laundry list, but
yeah, it is. It's a laundry list. Like when I was growing up, I was morbidly obese. I was bullied not only at school and dealing with difficult things at home, but even teachers would bully me. It seemed like that was acceptable back then. I remember I had one French teacher that would just relentlessly bully me on my weight.
Jeez.
But that led into me going to college and getting Epstein-Barr, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, Hashimoto's, brain tumors. I had 2 discs replaced in my neck, hip surgery, shoulder surgery, knee surgeries. My body was completely breaking down from me hating myself. I hated my weight. I didn't believe I was ever good enough. I believed that love was conditional. I had imposter syndrome. I literally thought about killing myself constantly. It was just like a way to end all this. But when I wasn't thinking of killing myself, I was killing myself to accomplish, thinking that that's where I would get, through achievement, that's where I would get love. And I would get some adulation, some praise, but it was always fleeting. And a big part of that was me too, like that I was always looking to the next thing. How can I get on the next podcast or a bigger stage or make more money? Or, I was never like really enjoying the moment and the accomplishment. And, it's that whole thing where if anyone talked to you like you talk to you, you wouldn't be their friend.
Yeah.
I was absolutely the harshest person to myself. I was gaslighting myself constantly and pushing through pain, pushing through abuse. And it wasn't until my first journey that I had a massive pivot. My biggest learning, where I was staring at the ceiling for hours after everyone was asleep, the biggest learning was I can have love. I can be loved. I'm good enough as a human being, not a human doing. I don't need to just live a life through accomplishment. All these people, I was surrounded by very, very famous people, many of which you've had on this podcast. And at the time, every time I entered a room, I would always give my resume. I'd like, here's why I'm worthwhile. Here's why you should know me. This is why I have value. And I'd give all my accomplishments. There were so many people here that were so accomplished. I felt scared to even talk about it. Most of them didn't know me. And I got deep in my journey in the cuddle puddle, laying on the floor. And people came in and out like a time-lapse movie, holding space for me, getting me blankets, helping me to the bathroom, getting me something to drink or eat or, hugging on me. And I kept thinking all night, like, why? Why are these people here? Why would they do this? They don't know who I am. These people are like already like famous, accomplished, wealthy. Who am I to them? How do I have value to them? Why are they doing this? Kept thinking that over and over. And then I had the epiphany of like, well, damn, I think I could just have love and be loved. And once I anchored that in my heart, the suicidal thoughts, the anxiety, the depression, like completely lifted. And my life was massively shifted. Like once, like you could have told me that, like it's so simple to say to someone and I would have rationalized that. I would have been like, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, you can have love. Of course. I would have been like, yep. But you can tell when someone's like rationalizing, but not like sitting with it and feeling it. once I felt it, like I said, I was just staring at the ceiling for hours. Like it was the greatest thing of my life that I just discovered was I can have love. I'm worthy of love. And once I had that, now I was thinking that I want to go find love. I was in a relationship, a marriage that was dysfunctional. We were more platonic, and doing some more work in the plant medicine space, I came to that conclusion that I appreciate this person, and good is the enemy of great. And I want real love. I want deep love. I want deep intimacy. And that's what led me to do a conscious uncoupling. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I met Hannah, who I'm engaged to now and really happy with.
Yeah. How long ago was that first journey?
That's almost 5 years ago. Yeah.
What called you to the first journey?
It's like one of those things where I think my soul knew.
Yeah.
And was calling me to this because I was really broken. Like I was really about to give up on life. But I rationalized it because I had friends and people I respected that were doing plant medicine work and seeing biohacking results, seeing performance enhancements. At the time, Tim Ferriss, Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, we're all talking about microdosing and journeys. And they saw cognitive enhancement. They saw performance enhancements. They were making more money, and I was like, wow, maybe I should do this because I can biohack my way to, a better brain and more accomplishment.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm like in a cuddle puddle, like acting like a 5-year-old and finding out that love is the answer. Fuck all the biohacking. Honestly, all that, like, I'm kind of known in the biohacking space, but all the biohacks that I learned were just keeping me alive with all the damage I was doing to myself. The 20-hour days, the 3-4 hours worth of sleep, the amphetamines and different steroids and all kinds of things that I was doing. Like it really like relentlessly tough on my body, physically, mentally, spiritually, completely unkind, always trying to push through. And so all these biohacks were things I learned on how to live through that.
Got you.
But once I had that spiritual aspect, the ease brought into my life. Now, instead of building the house on sinking sand, I had a solid foundation, and the biohacks make sense. But I think a lot of biohackers really have it backwards.
Yeah, I want to unpack that a little bit because I do think you're hitting on a few different things that are particularly resonant for me. And, it's this achievement-based orientation that drives us energetically into the ground.
Yeah.
Physically. I wasn't maybe presenting nearly as many kind of autoimmune or different kind of issues, but definitely had that where I was doing the biohacks just to kind of keep above water.
Mm-hmm.
If I wasn't getting in the sauna, the cold plunge and doing some of those things, I would have gone down probably a deeper hole. Or maybe I would have come out of it quicker because maybe that just prolonged the journey down. Who knows, right? But I know that once I kind of turned that around and I started removing all these things that were driving this, that help drive this behavior of accomplishment and doing, I needed less of the biohacks. And then I started doing to it like what I just wanted to do. And then it wasn't so much regimented, like I got to make sure I get all these things in. Like I go to Matter now and it's like, what do I want to do? Well, I know the CVAC machine is going to move lymph and help me feel good for my workouts and recovery. And I like the machine anyway. It's pretty cool. And then I'm big on light therapy. So the light bed is a no-brainer. And then the Nano V for, the great cellular regeneration. Like I feel great with those. And I'm not feeling like I need to do a bunch of things.
Mm-hmm.
But it can be more targeted because the system itself is running pretty well. And when it's not, it's like, what can I do to feel better? And sometimes it's shortcuts like amphetamines and caffeine and nicotine and fill in the blanks.
And some of these biohackers, if I'm being flat out honest, do not look very healthy.
Yeah.
And there's people that are doing zero biohacking that live in these blue zones that are 100 plus years old, supercentenarians that are drinking wine, that are smoking cigars, but they have deep relationships. They have purpose. They have connection to source, to God, to the people around them. They have love in their lives. And they're living very long, healthy lives.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these people that are trying to burn the candle at both ends are living with lots of ego, don't look so great, but they're talking about all the biohacking and living forever.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know if they're ever present. The whole
it's so funny. You sound like you're talking about not so long ago version of me. Like literally everything you just said, I'm like, yeah.
Oh, it's me too.
All that.
That even like
makes so much sense.
I'm a big NLP fan. And, while I'm thankful that Brian Johnson is bringing attention to some of these biohacks and, better foods and cacao and, these different things, the whole don't die idea is inviting in, it's really manifesting death. You're focused on death instead of being present with life. Like whatever you are resistant to, have fear of, there's a scarcity energy around, don't die. That's literally his whole mantra. That's all you're thinking about is death, 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 death. And so you're inviting that in. This is one of the reframes that you have like with NLP, neurolinguistic programming is, and that's like think Tony Robbins, Jim Quick, Joe Dispenza, etc. Okay, I hear you. And what is it that you want instead? Okay, like I don't want to die. I just don't want to die. What do you want instead? I want to live. I want to live well. I want to love. Now, maybe that doesn't sound as great in terms of marketing. Obviously, it's disruptive to say don't die, kind of like death water, or liquid death or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. But, that's not what I want to seek out. Like I want to invite in being present. I want to invite in having deep connection. I think depression often comes from when we're cut off from a connection with ourselves, with nature, with source, God, the universe, with animals, with a loved one, family, friends. All of that connection. And if you watch to play out narratives, right? Like to red pill it for a moment. I mean, what is it they do? They always try and isolate us, make us feel alone. Social distancing, make the other person feel like a disease. Now you're scared of other people. Now you can't have connection. Suicide rates go up, depression rates go up because we're not connected anymore.
And then finding any number of ways to divide us among many different lines where they could find something for you and I. We could agree on a lot, but they could find the thing that we disagree on and that'll just hammer
Oh
down.
my God. That's it. So this is another NLP thing. This is another brilliant technique. If there's one way to think, we're obviously going to agree. If there's 3 or more ways to think, we're going to have to talk about it. And there isn't going to be a selection bias. if there's only two options presented, whatever we don't choose is opposite to our selection and therefore has to be wrong.
Ugh.
If you notice, everything we're given now is iPhone, Android, Xbox, PlayStation, left, right, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, pro-gun, anti-gun, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine. If you were to talk to someone about their vaccine stance, they might say, well, I'm for the traditional vaccine where it's like a dead virus, but I don't want the mRNA version. There's probably not enough research there. But, if someone was maybe advanced in age and has more comorbidities, it might make sense that they get a vaccine, even if it's not highly tested, because of the risk is there. But, we shouldn't give it to children. It could have a social impact. But there's nuance to it, right?
Yeah.
There's nuance to it. Pro-life, pro-choice. There's nuance there, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny how we're always presented two choices.
Yeah.
And it's always split down the middle in a hot button issue.
And it's not allowed to have any nuance. You got to pick a fucking side.
You got to pick a side.
Bro.
They're NLPing the fuck out of us.
Yes.
And it's very intentional.
I was going to say,
and you know what?
So by design.
These things, while they may seem important and emotional to you, for the most part, are really unimportant in the big picture, because it's, while you're looking at this hand, you're not looking at what's up the other sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting away with all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Which is a whole nother rabbit hole. Maybe we'll just stay with this one for now. Don't get me going. Might have to edit some of this out. How did you heal everything that was going on with you?
Psychosomatic is very powerful in terms of, it's actually a lot of what I'm talking about with NLP. And when you think of Joe Dispenza or Tony Robbins, like when love enters in,
mm-hmm.
you truly are shifting epigenetically, you are shifting. You're getting out of overloaded adrenals and cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine and even dopamine. You're moving away from these addictions that you once had. When people do plant medicine, they don't find a need. There's some great statistics where it's around like 80% reduction in things like alcohol, amphetamines, the list goes on, like gambling, porn. All of those addictions go way down. And connection, when you look at the statistics too, connection to source, friends, etc., goes way up. So now they feel more connected. They've forgiven. They've invited love in. They're more in a parasympathetic nervous system, which
mm-hmm.
is rest and digest, not fight, flight, or freeze, like sympathetic nervous system. And so now their body's in a more receptive state as well. And it was the same for me. Literally, when your body's in fight, flight, or freeze, sympathetic, I was ultra sympathetic. I was hyper vigilant. Like, who's going to harm me? That's always what I was thinking. I felt like Jason fucking Bourne when I was just going through life, like scanning.
Damn.
And when you finally, I remember in my first journey on plant medicine on psilocybin, I yawned.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what is that?
You weren't a yawner?
No, I never got tired. I had to drug myself to sleep all the time.
Wow.
And I was like, what is yawning about? Like I was never in parasympathetic ever. And so when you're always in sympathetic, you're utilizing all of your ATP to run the system overdrive. You're never restoring, healing, nourishing. That happens in parasympathetic. So it's only when you drop into parasympathetic that you can have that restoration, that you can have that healing, that you can take up those nutrients. This is one of the reasons I believe in studies. We see like that there's hyper and hypo responders. We're always told like what the mean is. I've ran a lot of studies in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And we see but there's this massive spectrum where on both ends you have the people that are essentially non-responders to whatever the intervention is or whatever the supplement is. And then you have some people that are hyper responders. I believe that if we were, there's certainly like genetic and epigenetic aspects to this. Like, maybe you have some greater level of enzyme or predisposition or whatever. But I feel like largely, if we were to look at whether they're regularly in parasympathetic or they're ultra sympathetic, that I could tell you who the responder and non-responder is. When you're always in fight, flight, or freeze, you will not be able to absorb, to utilize, to take up and maximize these nutrients. So this is one of the reasons, like in plant medicine, we've been exploring kind of the yin and yang of this is kind of ancient wisdom meets, new biohacking wisdom, is to combine things like X cells, V cells, PRP, peptides, etc., at the time of a plant medicine experience when you're in full parasympathetic, because you're super receptive at that point.
Yeah.
Your body is in full surrender.
That's a great way to put it. It's funny, I had written down here to ask you about yawning as it pertains to psychedelics. And it is because I, more than most people I know, when I'm in ceremony, yawn a ton. It comes on and I keep yawning. And I had asked a friend of mine, I said, dude, why do I yawn so much? He's like, your body is finally relaxing.
Boom. That's it exactly.
And then when I had my assessment done with Thomas, who will have been on the podcast by now, he confirmed, he's like, yeah, you're highly sympathetic. And to what you were just saying, my ATP production is way down. My sodium, potassium exchange is off. And, so I'm curious, like the protocol for me is going to be to kind of lay on this beamer-like mat. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if it's just going to be like 20 minutes of like getting me to parasympathetic.
Opening those like ionic voltage,
yeah. And now like just hearing you talk about it, I'm thinking like maybe there's really start to focus my work at matter with what will get me more parasympathetic, like the theta chamber. I've been in there a couple of times. It's been a while. That might be a nice 30-minute session for me,
Here's an example. Like I remember when I had 2 discs replaced in my neck. I have 2 titanium discs. I kept a lot of neck pain. So I would have to get frequent massages. If I was on my way to the massage and I'm like racing through traffic and I'm like all jacked up and sympathetic and, almost in an accident going 80 miles an hour because I'm running late. And
because you're trying to get as much work done as possible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, oh, damn, I'm going to be like 5 or 10 minutes late for my massage. My massage costs $100. It's like freaking out. I show up. You think my muscles are going to be hypertonic. They're going to be flexed. And now if someone's trying to work on my muscles that are trying to protect me, what do you think is going to happen? You think they're going to be very receptive to restoration and healing and surrender? No. This is why, like, if I showed up like that, I started learning my body. I would ask, the massage therapist to just do that kind of like light tickle. I'm kind of like, putting my nails lightly across my skin to just relax me for 5, 10, 15 minutes and then do some deep work.
Mm-hmm.
You need to drop into parasympathetic. You need to do that breath work. You need to relax. Your brainwave state changes radically. The reason that that's called like the theta chamber is because it's trying to get you into theta brainwave state, which is kind of like the ultimate brainwave state.
Yeah.
Like where you can kind of rewrite the code. Like that's the Joe Dispenza kind of like super goal of like getting to theta. Like gamma, theta, like all those kind of brain waves are like at like the highest level of vibration, so to speak.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but like theta would be, it's 3 a.m. You're kind of half awake, half asleep, but you're conscious and like shit's coming through to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when I've
channeling. Yeah,
exactly. I've had some stretches where
downloads
where it's like, what, what? I'm not trying to go back to bed. I'm just enough awake, but in that theta state where it's a fascinating place to be.
Yeah, I think who was it? Like Einstein, FDR. Like some of these people like would do the thing where like they'd set up like the T sets or whatever, and they would like nod off.
Yeah, they'd be holding like a spoon or
and then it would drop. It would make noise, but then like for the next 60 seconds or so, they were in the right brainwave state to like really tune in and like get some, amazing downloads.
Yeah,
super interesting.
Well, what do you have for other strategies for spending more time in parasympathetic? And you mentioned breath work. What was interesting is one of the things that the assessment said with regards to me with doing breath work, with doing like more kind of heightened breath work versus
like the more ventilation.
I'm like, it's hard for me to do breath work. Like sometimes I get a little high in the chest, or he goes, your body's not made for it right now.
It's bound up.
Yeah. He's like, it's, because you're sympathetic to begin with, like it doesn't take much for you to get like even more sympathetic. And so then when that happens, the breathing's a little more restricted. It's always like to do breath work. My first response is fuck.
Well, this is the idea, like the psychosomatic anchor, like where it doesn't matter, like, whether you're like when you smile, let's say, like if you force the smile, like it actually changes your neurotransmitters, your brainwave states, etc. It's the same idea with this. Like if you're breathing shallow, whether you're breathing shallow because you're anxious or you're anxious and you're breathing shallow, it doesn't matter. Your body's like thinking the same thing, making that connection both ways. So if you can find a way to just breathe deeper, to open up your diaphragm, do like that belly breathing, that's where you're going to find that you get relaxation. You literally get lowering cortisol and vasodilation, again, brainwave states changing. And
all right, let's talk more about and what'd you call it when you're doing it?
Peri, post.
Yeah, peri and posts. Like I've heard a few different strategies around that. I'm sure it's medicine dependent as well. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about like I'm heading into let's call it a psilocybin journey, because generally for an ayahuasca journey, it's you're in your dieta, and so that's pretty dialed in. Or well, I'll just let you take the wheel here. What are your thoughts?
Well, on the dieta part, or
no, just like what kind of supplements leading up to a mushroom journey and or ayahuasca journey are supportive for people?
So one of the things like we're talking about is if you're ultra sympathetic, I've been around people that I was bringing them into the journey space, and basically whenever you commit to the journey, you're already on your journey. I've watched people go from unconscious to subconscious to conscious mind on the way to the journey, freaking out. Stuff's already working up that they don't want people to see. Your shadow self is not your dark or evil self. It's the stuff that you're scared that anyone will see, but the stuff that you really need the world to see, to be seen, to be in your truth. You've hidden that away because it's your most intimate. It's your most vulnerable. And we're calling that shadow, but that's really like the truest part of you. The stuff that we have in common with everyone else, it's easy to share that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff that is uniquely us, that we could get rejected for, that's where people have fear sharing that. That's the shadow self. And that's working up, oh my God, someone's going to see me and reject me. And that fear going into a journey, especially one with numerous people that are going to be there, is intense, especially like for someone on their first experience. And so I feel like what's important leading into a journey is going to be things that are anxiolytic, reducing anxiety, as well as enhancing your stress capacity, your allostatic capacity, your stress bucket. And adaptogens are going to be significant for increasing the size of your stress bucket, increasing your allostatic load potential, this capacity. And so those are going to be things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, ginseng, those kinds of things. Probably ashwagandha and rhodiola are my two favorites. And certainly many of the medicinal mushrooms are going to be highly adaptogenic, including things like lion's mane, also maitake, shiitake, turkey tail. But there's so many great mushrooms. Also, if you really have anxiety, just in general, I think something like hanakiol, which comes from magnolia bark, is a very potent substance. And there is a metabolite called dihydrohanakiol beta, DHHB, that is very powerful. So if you're feeling something potentially acutely, those could be amazing. Also, you're probably not getting enough GABA as a neurotransmitter. So taking an optimized form of GABA would be a great thing. And L-theanine is a great amino acid. It just helps take the edge off and put you into that alpha brainwave state. Okay.
Do you have like good sources for some of this stuff, or?
Yeah, I can share a list. We'll have this as a download for the podcast.
Right,
I'll have a whole list. But then moving, I guess also looking at serotonin. I want to like preface this. I think a lot of people think depression is purely serotonin, and that is completely false. The serotonin model of depression has been massively disproven. There's a meta-analysis that was done in 2017 as well as 2022 that both of these meta-analyses, where they looked at all of the studies on depression with SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So things like Cymbalta and the whole list of all these different drugs that are so common and took off during COVID. Like they went up by around 30% over the last couple of years.
Wow.
They found in both of these meta-analyses that they potentially cause more harm than good, and there should be a complete cessation until we understand the impact of these. Depression is the neurotransmitters across the board, all of them being down. So when you think about dopamine, serotonin, acetylcholine, endorphins, etc., like all of these are going to be down across the board because your body's saying, we want to feel less. We want to take in less. We're traumatized already. And what you also see is neuroplasticity is almost zero. BDNF, this protein that's associated with neuroplasticity, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, goes to basically zero. And this is where you lack cognitive resilience and you stay in loops. And this used to be me, where I would think about the implications of something. Someone said something to me and I'd think about it over and over and over and over. I was in my loops. I was depressed. I didn't have neuroplasticity. and my neurotransmitters were down so I could feel less. Instead of being highly empathetic, I was lacking emotion entirely. Like there's a song by the Lumineers where he says the opposite of love is indifference. It's not hate. And so the key is turning all of these neurotransmitters back on. It serves for a while, especially if you're in a toxic environment, of course. A key is going to be getting yourself out of that toxic environment. But you want to turn these back on. You want to turn neuroplasticity back on. And when you're on these substances, your brain literally lights up globally. You can see these areas of the brain that haven't been tapped or have been turned off. Even areas like where there's been emotional trauma can look like there was physical trauma, like a physical insult. So think of like being like hit in the head with a bat or, being in a car accident. Your brain can look like that from emotional trauma. These areas can get turned back on with a psychedelic experience. That BDNF, that neuroplasticity can get turned back on. Your default mode network, where you built all these constructs that are protecting you with your religion and your politics and your safety network and all your beliefs that aren't truly your identity. I think there's that famous Bob Proctor video where he's like saying, that's your name. That's not you. Tell me about you. And so these constructs get turned off. Default mode network, ego get turned off. Neuroplasticity gets cranked up. Neurotransmitters get cranked up. Now you can rewrite the code. Now you can pivot in a way that was impossible, even with therapy. Your ego's always doing this. Deflect, like that's who we are. Who are we without that? Like if you've had trauma, it's the backpack you wear for safety. This is who I am. This is what I deserve. And something like ketamine, you can take that backpack off. You can put it on the other side of the room. You can look at it and say, I'm safe without it. I don't need that anymore. That's dissociation. That's another part of these psychedelics. You can be dissociated from your trauma. You can see yourself more in this third person, God's eye view. And so all of these things are critical to the psychedelic experience and making these changes. So the serotonin theory being flawed, and yet it's an important neurotransmitter that I like to modulate going in to make sure there's enough of it. So D3, saffron, potentially a 5-HTP if you are low. But I like typically to save 5-HTP in something like Kanna, which is a natural SSRI, just post-journey.
Okay.
To replete serotonin. So you don't feel as alone, as tired, as scarce in your energy, after your journey. But same with things like acetylcholine. Like if you've had like a deep journey where you're like deeply focusing and, thinking through things. Sometimes you have journeys like that, right? Where you're working through like, should I quit this job? Should I get this divorce? Should I, really change my life in a radical path? That's where repleting acetylcholine by doing something like acetyl L-carnitine for the acetyl group, doing alpha GPC for the choline, and then doing something like huperzine A as an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor to help replete and build back quickly is going to be a powerful combination. And then lastly, dopamine, you're going to be working through in these journeys to get back online. And that's where paraxanthine, like update, is going to be great. Taking something like L-Dopa could be helpful from Acuna. These kinds of things. Tyrosine helps build back dopamine. But I like the idea post journey of continuing to take the adaptogens. I like the idea of taking things to enhance neuroplasticity post journey, because the longer you can stay neuroplastic, the better you can, and especially if you're working with a facilitator, the better your chances of really making those difficult changes, especially when you go back to the environment you were already in.
Yeah. And as far as dosing and stuff like that and I'm sure we'll put this in the kind of the PDF, but like generally speaking, with some of these or with each of these, what would you say for people?
Yeah, I will definitely have all the doses and all that. And like, there's, groups like Ceremonia that actually use this protocol. Like there's a number of facilities globally that are using the protocol that I've laid out. And by the way, the things that really enhance neuroplasticity, people have probably heard of lion's mane, but honestly, that one's just okay. There's something called 7,8 dihydroxyflavone that's way more potent. And then its metabolites, get ready for numbers and letters, 4-DMA, which means dimethylamino 7,8 dihydroxyflavone. You can get these through Nootropics Depot. But those two compounds are very potent at enhancing neuroplasticity. And really, that's keeping the brain young. But there's a lot of things that you can do in your life that will enhance neuroplasticity. Basically, like anything that's challenging to the brain. So like, using the opposite hand to play a sport, using the opposite hand to brush your teeth, putting your belt on the opposite way, taking a different way to work, learning a new instrument or language. Challenging yourself mentally is how you keep your brain young. That's how you elevate BDNF. There's another one called NGF and mTOR in the brain.
I haven't played around much with the brushing the teeth, using the opposite hand for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You do? Do you? Yeah.
I'm very ambidextrous. Yeah.
You are?
Yeah.
Something that's self-taught just by you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've thought about it a lot. And it does help. And honestly, like the more cognitively resilient you are, like this is something that I talk about in my book, The Energy Formula, quite a bit, is there's a resilience that you have that carries over to your physical. And the more physically resilient you are, the more cognitively resilient you are. So like stoicism is a mentality, a mindset that helps you be cognitively resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And, the same thing is true if you're doing cold plunges and hot saunas and contrasting. You're improving your your allostatic capacity that I was talking about, your stress bucket, the size of the stress bucket. You're actually growing it through what's called eustress, EU stress, positive stress, hormesis. And when you're doing that, the hot sauna and the cold plunge, you're enhancing your cognitive resilience. You can now deal with more life stress that's coming up. And if you train yourself stoically, if you learn to meditate, have gratitude, now you can deal with more physical stress in that hot sauna, in that cold plunge. You can breathe and get centered and drop in, right?
Yeah.
When you're centered, you're present. When you're present, you're mindful. When you're grateful, everything shifts. You move out of backwards thinking, past thinking, which is guilt, and forward thinking about what could happen, anxiety.
Yeah.
And you're just present. So you move out of guilt and anxiety and all those fears about what already happened that's in the past, you can't change, and what may happen, 99% of which won't, and just be present.
That 99.9% that doesn't happen is such a motherfucker. Because there's like an art to playing with it, because you don't want to be completely surprised by something around the corner. How is it that how do we dance that dance? Because I know, and maybe part of it is our resilience. When we're feeling less resilient, there's less discernment around spending a ton of energy on future casting and potentially catastrophizing what could happen. Then when we're resilient, we're just like, we kind of consider the thoughts about what could go wrong, and then we move on. We're not ruminating on every which way this particular thing could go wrong.
For sure. And look, whenever I'm actually reluctant to like bring up the story of my past, because like each time I'm reliving it.
Sure.
And that doesn't serve me. If I really think about the past, which is why I kind of got into the reframing around my parents and how how it does serve me, right? Because the reframe changes everything. That instead of me having guilt for this person that was in my past, this past version of me, I'm so thankful that person got me here. I wouldn't have all the accolades, all the accomplishments, all the success, all the notoriety without any of that. If that person didn't work so fucking hard, wasn't so driven. Is it healthy to do that for your whole life? No. But pretty much everyone who's in our position, that's how they got there.
Yeah.
Now you have to make the pivot. What are you going to do now? Because that's not healthy. But the reframe is thank you, self.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone that got me here. I wouldn't be here otherwise. And looking forward to the future instead of catastrophizing. Obviously, there's the idea of manifestation and envisioning the amazing things that also could be instead of the terrible things. Obviously, the terrible things keeps us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense in terms of evolution when we're kind of at that bottom of Maslow's pyramid, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to like vibrate our way up to the top, we have to let go of the catastrophizing. And we have to be delulu, as they say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And really look to what can be in a positive way. And the places that you could get yourself. I know that like when I did an amazing session with a hypnotherapist, and he regressed me. And he said, like, can you see yourself at this traumatic moment as a child? And I think I was 5 and it was Christmas. And I was already starting to cry when he was dropping me in. And then he said, can you hug that child? And now I'm like sobbing. And I'm like, oh, man, like, this inner child that I'm supposed to protect. I'm always adulting, but what about that child inside that's hurting? Let me love on that child. But then the moment that I had a massive shift, as big as the one as my first journey, was when he said, what does that child think about you? This 5-year-old looked at me and said, holy fuck. Look at all this stuff you've done. As a 5-year-old, I thought taking a vacation 3 hours away was a big deal. Mm-hmm. I've been to 60 countries. Mm-hmm. I'm known as the best in the world in supplements. I've, done crazy things like traveled through the Greek Isles and, jumped off of cliffs and like lived like an insane life and achieved the highest success, been on stages all around the world and wrote a best-selling book and all this crazy stuff. And I was sobbing because that's what I wanted my whole life, was to get that. And I finally got it from myself.
Wow.
I gave myself that. I wanted someone to say, great job, Shawn. I love you. And I finally gave it to myself by just seeing myself from this child's perspective. Like, holy fuck. Look at all you did. This is crazy. I never would have ever thought you would accomplish a tenth of this. So powerful.
Well, thanks for sharing that, because it I don't know if you necessarily read my mind, but I wanted to like go down this path of like how do we spend more time in gratitude? How do we stop and smell the roses? How do we reflect on this life lived? And I was in a men's group where we did this practice where adult Cal wrote a letter to 7-year-old Cal, and then 7-year-old Cal wrote a letter to adult Cal. In
beautiful,
very similar to the experience you had. Like 7-year-old Cal, fucking mind was blown. He couldn't believe what adult Cal had done. Like all the shit he had gone through and all the things he had accomplished. And to your point, like, we took like one vacation all the way through high school, and we drove down from Maine to Florida with 4 other families in our station wagons. And that was the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
And that was cool.
Yeah.
And when I look at some of the experiences I've had, I mean, the fact that, the people that I surround myself with and get to interact with, and I just don't spend enough time celebrating that. Mm-hmm. I do a better job of not being balls to the wall, trying to go and accomplish whatever I think needs to be accomplished. I've done a better job of kind of, dialing back the throttle there. But I think there is that missing piece of like, you're safe, because that's a big thing for me, is like this feeling, this lack of safety, which comes from a much earlier age, and that drives a lot of that behavior. And so that is a gift, because it's created a lot of really cool things. And, like not only am I safe, but like you can put the shield and the sword down, like the battle's over, dude.
What if everything's a gift? Everything's a lesson. Everything serves you. Now what's there to fear?
Yeah.
When I did 5-MeO DMT, which is kind of like the weaponized version of DMT, like,
I haven't heard that before. I like that.
Bufo actually didn't work for me, which is the kind of natural version of 5-MeO. And but when I did it, I've done it 2 different times, and both times I was shot into the universe. It's a very powerful substance, and dipped into like the inky black of everything, the omniverse of all of it. And I had this sense of, I'm connected to you. I'm connected to God. I'm connected to a tree. I'm connected to everything. 1. And 2, that I was never born and I never die. So I'm just transmuting. I don't know if you've watched the video, The Egg, but it's a very powerful story. It's about 7 minutes long. Maybe we can link it here.
Yeah.
It's powerful to watch. It may not align completely with your spiritual views, but I would say watch it and see what it brings up for you. Because it's a very interesting take on God and spirituality. But for me, going through those experiences, I shed that I have to achieve I need to go faster. Death is imminent. The Brian Johnson, don't die. There's more to do.
Yeah.
What if I don't die? What if I can take my foot off the gas? What if I can be present? What if I'm connected to everything? So me doing something at Cal's expense is me hurting myself. Maybe I stop fucking people over and entering relationships that fuck me over. That's one of the most key lessons that I've got. I would encourage like anyone to make a list of what lights you up and what takes away energy. What gives you energy, what takes away energy. Again, this goes back to the psychosomatic aspect where, I can tell you about all the supplements, mitochondrial health. I didn't get into like things like PQQ, ergothioneine, CoQ10, MOTS-C as a peptide, like things like that. Cool. I love mitochondria. And what relationships are giving you energy? What relationships are taking away energy from you? What music, what movies, what books, what podcasts are giving you energy and which ones are taking away energy? What places you go, what foods? Start tuning in to what's giving you energy and what's taking away energy from you. And if you start seeking out the relationships that are energetically beneficial, you have to give too.
Yeah.
You can't just be taking energy from others and be that energy vampire.
Yeah.
This has to be reciprocal. But what relationships? Go down, like scroll through your phone book or your WhatsApp or whatever. Scroll through it and see that's a 7, that's a 9, that's a 4, that's a -10. Prioritize those people, those places, those things that give you energy and start investing in those. Your net worth is your net worth. So invest in them. Get energy. Give energy. Fill that bucket. That's hormesis. Like you can actually grow your stress bucket. You can level up by seeking out things that actually give you energy, and you will have more mitochondrial function. You will have more mitochondria through mitochondrial biogenesis.
What I love about this idea too is you're not telling someone you got to carve out another 5 hours during your week. It's like, no, you've already got some free time. You're saying do a deep dive on how you're spending that and an assessment of how those things line up and rank them, and then start to get rid of those things that, as you said, aren't lighting you up, and then really prioritize those ones that are giving. I mean, that's, again, you don't need to quit your job and follow your fucking any of that stuff. It's like just taking an honest accounting. And I know a lot of people are going to want to do this. You mentioned it, food.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy, you and I know it's a major part of it.
Oh, I was a massive junk food junkie.
Me too.
Most of my life. I was living off that dopamine fix. It was keeping, but again, it served me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
It got me through traumatic situations. Thank you. Alcohol at certain points.
Mm-hmm.
Not mad at it. It got me through. All of these things got me through.
I think that's an important point too. With any of those things that can be looked at as negative, sometimes we don't have the tools. We're not ready, to hit a situation head on. And so we numb ourselves with food, with drugs, alcohol, nicotine. It could be with some things that are considered really good, like working out, and you're just numbing.
Working. I was a workaholic.
Yes.
I was literally working 16, 20-hour days.
Because you just weren't ready. And I've been through periods where I'm not ready. I went through it this summer where I was feeling something and I was not ready to deal with it. And so I went down into the depths. Now, on the outside, it didn't necessarily look like that, but I knew what I was doing. Like, on some level, I knew I was not making good decisions. We were talking about it earlier when we were at Matter, like good decisions beget good decisions, and you kind of keep with the good habits, well, I was going the opposite way. And I was just like feeling a little bit worse, kind of, I don't want to say each day, but over time, I just knew I was not sleeping as well, having night sweats. I was ingesting a lot of different things that were not benefiting me. I was eating like shit. And then when I decided to turn that around in mid-August, it just became like a commitment to this. It was like one thing at a time, just removing it. And then as I was doing that, it was harder to eat shitty food because I was starting to care for myself and show up for myself. And then it finally got to the point where I started to get real serious about what's going on in my gut. And I did a parasite cleanse and I did an anti-candida cleanse. And then I did another assessment of blood and stool that was a much deeper dive. And then realized that I got a lot of invaders. And so like, let's take care of that and like continue to eat really clean. And it became this thing where I just feel pretty vital right now. And I needed to go through what I went through this summer to kind of rise from the ashes almost. I mean, it's not that dramatic, but I'd be interested to see what numbers looked like, at the end of July to what they look like now, because I felt terrible,
Well, again, I'd go back to, I can give you all the supplements in the world. If you're in like sympathetic, ultra sympathetic states, you're not going to be utilizing them. And so if you're in a job you hate, a relationship you hate, if you're in a toxic environment, that needs to change first. Like if I didn't give you the peptides and the supplements and the biohacks and the photo biomodulation and cold plunges and all this, but I just changed the job that you were going into one that you loved, and you woke up, you were excited to go to work, you have that energy now, that vitality. I mean, that's all I changed. Like the biohacks are great, but again, you need that foundation where you're actually receptive to receive. You need to be in surrender at times.
Oof. That's a tough one for a lot of us. But that's what we learn in, certainly in plant medicine, I think was one of the greatest gifts it showed me. Interestingly enough, my first 5-MeO experience, I was a little surprised by how quick it came on. It was supposed to come on after my third inhale. It came on after my first. And I went right to terrified. And so the body's reaction was to fight it, hold on. The opposite of surrender. And it was one of the most challenging experiences of my life until eventually, I don't think I consciously, I think I just, I couldn't fight. I mean, it was going to win. And I let go. And then it was an incredible experience. But in that fighting it was brutal. And it actually happened in my ayahuasca ceremony. And I was trying, I thought I was surrendering, but it was a very passive surrender where I was kind of laying down and it was running me over versus finding my center, finding my breath, leaning in and just being there for it. And
so true. This is such a great point. It really ties into like what I'm saying about parasympathetic. And it's really an important point for anyone who's facilitating or new to journeys or thinking about how they journey, is that when you're not in parasympathetic, you're coming into these journeys like I was coming into that massage, right? Like where you're type A, you're like all anxious. This is why someone might give you MDMA or MDA as like a heart opener. They might do some stretching, some breath work ahead of the journey to drop you in more into parasympathetic. Even with the intention setting circle, that can help kind of, allay some of your concerns or worries, like as you see how I'm common to all these people and everyone's dealing with something. But if you are ultra sympathetic, like I was going into many of my early journeys, it takes large doses to overpower you. This is just like if I was to give you a lot of alcohol, you were drunk, but your friend slips, splits their head on the sidewalk, there's blood everywhere. You're going to like, boom, turn it right back on. Cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, your adrenals are firing like, boom. Now I'm like pretty clear that drunkenness is put aside. And you can act quickly, you can, help this person, but you're not drunk anymore. This is the same thing as like when you're doing a journey and there's this plant medicine in your system. Unless you're in a surrender mode, you need to be overpowered, to your point. And this is where like the deeper and deeper you get into this work, the more you can surrender. And the word you say is lean in. And that's the word I use. The safer you feel, the more comfortable you are with the uncomfortable. And know I'll be okay on the other side of this, especially when you have great facilitators, set and setting, so on.
Yeah.
You can journey away from the spaceship with the, oxygen line, or, journey away from the deep sea vehicle or whatever with your oxygen, kind of wade into the inky black, into the shadow self, and really look at these, unrevealed spaces, because you're safe. And it's going to take less and less and less plant medicine to be that effective, the more parasympathetic you are, because you can actually receive it. For me, I went from it took me like over 5 grams when I was like early on, to when I was living in Nosara, Costa Rica, and I was like very digitally detoxed. I'd take like a gram and I was like on a full blown journey and all the visuals.
Damn.
And, it's because I was like so relaxed. So really the more experienced you get, like the less and less you need.
That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
More reason to continue to work on my autonomic nervous system.
Exactly.
I want to talk about a few other supplements and things that you have a lot of experience with. One in particular, like with peptides,
mm-hmm.
I've always taken them subcutaneously, but I see they're made, as orals as well. Are the orals as effective as a sub-Q? And
no, typically not. Like most of these, like peptides, mean like a chain of amino acids, and amino acids can be cleaved. These proteins can be cleaved. They're short proteins. When I say peptides, like it's, anywhere from like 4 to 50 amino acids long, is going to be these like oligopeptides and polypeptides, but they're not really proteins. So they're going to be very easily cleaved. And so once it's cleaved, it's no longer a bioregulatory signal. So it can't, when it's no longer in that chain of correct amino acids in the correct length, it will no longer signal as it should. So typically, most peptides cannot be taken orally. There are a couple that seem to do pretty well. There's like 5-amino 1-MQ. But most of them, like even the BPC 157 that you see orally, mostly that's just working on a gut level. It's not working on a systemic level. So most of these are going to be far superior on a subcutaneous injection standpoint. Now, there are intranasal sprays that would work as well.
Okay.
Because that membrane is so thin intranasally. Maybe you've tried intranasal ketamine or different things like that.
Yeah.
Most of these peptides are going to work well on that level.
Okay. That was my intuition that I just, and especially I would guess that if you have gut issues, you're sympathetic, it's going to be less bioavailable anyway.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
okay.
And that goes back to this idea, Cal, like where if you were doing a ketamine experience, maybe if you're going into a ketamine clinic or something, that would be the time to do these peptides. Whenever you're like deepest relaxed, that's the time to do something therapeutic, because that's when it's going to be absorbed, utilized, stored in the best way possible, instead of your body like rejecting. It's fearful of what are these things, and it doesn't have the blood supply, the energy devoted to those things. Again, sympathetic, rest and digest. That's cool. When you're relaxed, that's what your body's working on: healing, digesting, using these things, sending them to the right places. When you're stressed, when you're sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze, everything's diverted to keeping you alive now, not in the future.
Yeah.
This isn't protecting you in the future. It's protecting you right now. So this is the type of kind of presence that we don't want ourselves in, where we're always fighting for life right now.
Yeah. Because it won't have the resources to take the nutrients, as you were saying, and, kind of assimilate them to your body, or whatever the right word is. But yeah, they're on guard for survival.
Exactly.
Yeah. You talked about it earlier, mitochondria. And since for me, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, with the sodium potassium exchange.
Yeah.
Just can you unpack it a little bit for people?
Sure.
Like, I know this is something that is really big for you as well. Like
that's a huge part. Like I had, it's known as like a lot of these autoimmune conditions, your body again is fighting back, right? Like, so you're in sympathetic nervous system. You do have hypertonic muscles. Your body is literally resistant. If someone was to massage me when I was in these hyper stress spaces, like they'd be like, God, like what's going on with you? Like you feel so tense. I'm like, I'm not tense. Like, it's like even the idea of being told you're tense makes you tense.
Yeah.
But this is being an insufficient cellular energy spaces. It's known as ICE. It's a condition where you do not have enough cellular energy. You're running into that's kind of the precursor or the preliminary phase before full mitochondrial dysfunction. And then that's going to lead to metabolic dysfunction, where we used to call that syndrome X, but it's like a cluster of really about 99% of disease is not genetic in nature, it's metabolic in nature. 99% of aging is biologic and therefore metabolic in nature.
Thomas and I talked about this a bit, and people want to blame everything on genetics, and they end up bringing, calling in these diseases and whatnot that their parents, grandparents, whoever had, because, I have this gene. It's like,
no, it's mostly, to be honest, it is metabolic dysfunction, but going back to the psychosomatic stuff, it's unresolved trauma. It's manifesting as disease. They've shown that just like one journey on anything, ketamine, psilocybin, MDMA, there's a 33% reduction in heart attacks, strokes, and diabetes. Just one at any point in your life. That's because you're resolving and freeing trauma. And quite often, where it's located in your body, that disease is very correlated to the trauma that you've dealt with. So, like if you've have stomach cancer, for example, it could be that like you've been guarded, that you're protecting your core. I mean, think about like, if you're someone who's highly traumatized, I'm taking this pillow out here from behind my back. You'll see people do this, like when they're sitting there with you.
Yeah.
They have the pillow over their stomach and they're sitting there.
Yeah.
and their arms are crossed. They're protecting their core.
Yeah.
What is it like? Anyone that wins, that feels free, that's open, that's loving does, even when people are blind, they lift their arms and they won and they're free and you're wide open. Your core is completely exposed.
Yeah.
You're fully vulnerable and feel safe.
Huh.
But people that don't feel safe crouch down, cover up, make themselves small. You're protecting your core.
Mm.
And this could lead to disease. This can lead to your body changing radically over time. And so that has to be, I think, like we're going to see more of this in disease progression, pathology, etiology in the future. It's not going to be considered woo anymore. And certainly Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Bruce Lipton, there's a lot of people that have been doing this research. But going back to the idea of insufficient cellular energy states, it's mitochondrial dysfunction and a lack of the number of mitochondria. So mitochondria, to back up to kind of middle school biology, are the cellular powerhouses. They're the organelles in the cell that create ATP, adenosine triphosphate. That's the high energy. These phosphate bonds are high energy bonds that create energy for your body to run. And without enough ATP, we will run into these insufficient cellular energy states. And you will be running low on energy, running towards disease, aging faster as a result. This is where hormesis in particular, that's the idea of a positive stress, eustress, creating greater adaptation. And applied more specifically, mitohormesis is the idea of stressing the mitochondria to elicit greater function, resilience, and mitochondrial biogenesis, creating more mitochondria. In a energy-dependent cell, we tend to think there's one mitochondria in a cell. That's what we're taught in like our biology class. But in a highly energy-dependent cell, think of like the heart, a cardiomyocyte, or a brain cell, a neuron. We're going to have up to 5,000 mitochondria in the cell.
Jesus.
And so this is why when you don't have enough cellular energy, when you don't have enough ATP, where are you going to feel it most? Where is the disease progression going to come from? Brain, heart.
Yep.
Right? So we need to do things that enhance the resilience of the mitochondria in particular and increase the number of mitochondria. So this is that idea of mitohormesis. And those are the things like cold plunges, hot saunas, things that are difficult for us even cognitively, but are increasing our resilience. If you imagine the bell curve, there's eustress on one side, again, EU stress, positive stress. In the middle, there's the Goldilocks zone. And down the other side of the curve, there's going to be distress. And so the Goldilocks zone would be the optimal amount of stress for the optimal amount of adaptation. But that's always going to change. You need to be aware of like what's going on in your life. If I'm, I just got divorced, I just lost my job, I just, lost a ton of money, that doing the fasting, doing the cold plunge, doing the keto diet, whatever, may not be the right time. Your bucket's already overflowing. Your stress bucket's already overflowing.
Yes.
So you need to be mindful of the stress that you already have, how much is in that bucket already. Because it's great to increase the size of that bucket when it's not that full. But when it's overflowing, you're not going to be able to increase the size of that bucket. So you need to stem the overflow first, and then you can work on the ideal stress. But beyond that, there are some nutrients that are highly effective to enhance mitochondrial function. There's something called the electron transport chain, and like CoQ10 is really important for ATP production, as well as, and ubiquinol is really the best form. And PQQ is kind of a sister molecule to CoQ10. Those are really great together. Another great one is called ergothioneine. And this one is one I helped bring to market. It's a trace amino acid. It may be the next new vitamin. Really interesting. You have a unique transporter system in your body for it. It's called the ETT or the OCT1, literally just for this compound. It tells you how important it is to your body. There's a deficiency demonstrated for it. You have cognitive decline and again, cardio function decline when you don't have enough of it. You can only get it from the food supply in certain beans, mushrooms, organ meats. And there's also a unique storage system for it in your body. And what happens here is it's not just a cellular antioxidant, but a mitochondrial antioxidant protecting the mitochondria. So this one's really exciting, especially in higher doses, like 25 to 50 milligrams a day. We're seeing pretty incredible results. And then I would say something like MOTS-C at times as a peptide has been really interesting for mitochondrial function. MOTS-C. It's all caps.
MOTS-C.
And then other pieces that when you're dysfunctioning mitochondrially that you'd want to get under control. One, I'll go back to getting back into parasympathetic. So adaptogens and anxiety and stress control. Two, doing things like, let's see, probably like one of the most ideal would be like dihydroberberine for blood glucose control, because glycation is causing damage in your body. Like one of the really the things that's pushing disease progression. The other one is inflammation. So things like CBD, CBG, CBN, maybe tetrahydrocurcumin or curcumin. And then oxidation, just again, great antioxidants, things like N-acetylcysteine, which boosts glutathione, I'm a big fan of, and probably going back to ergothioneine.
Okay, damn. Mm-hmm. Again, these will all be available. You won't have to be driving down the road here trying to Google these things. What's the last one you said?
Ergothioneine.
And that's the one that you've helped kind of bring to market. Along
with dihydroberberine, that's another one I did.
What's that process look like? Just for people like me who are idiots. Like, how do you, like you did with paraxanthine as well, right? And maybe let's use that as an example too, because we've got Update here. We've been drinking it.
Yeah. I research as a biochemist. I research pathways and how to exploit a pathway, if you will. Like, just seeing. Quite often looking at metabolites or looking at sister molecules, maybe that haven't been studied, and then applying some rationale with what happens one step before, one step after, or one step beside. And then really just thinking through extrapolation, interpolation, like what's likely here. And then I would potentially take that to in vitro, which means like cellular research, or preclinical research, which would mean animal models, and just testing that theory out. And then if that holds true, then I'm filing patents, and then working it down the path of doing toxicology and safety work, doing efficacy work in humans, and then it.
From the day that you have an idea that this thing may be something,
mm-hmm.
to when it's in an ingestible form. And I understand it's different for each one you do, but is there like a range of like, it takes about this many years?
Yeah, it's usually about 2 to 3 years, and probably similar amount of millions of dollars, like $2 to $3 million.
Jesus. And so right now you have a few that are in the hopper.
Yeah, and I have probably over 100 that are theoretical.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which one are you most excited about right now?
That's already out, or
that's already out, or the one that's already out.
Yeah.
And I know for Daniel's sake, you better say paraxanthine.
Paraxanthine is definitely the number one. Probably number two would be dileucine, which is L-leucine monohydrate. So it's 2 amino acids, so a dipeptide of leucine. 2 leucines put together. Leucine drives muscle protein synthesis, which means anabolism, growth of muscle.
Okay.
So we always thought that leucine was the driver of muscle protein synthesis alone. But one, it may actually be dileucine. Two, using this PEP1 transporter in the gut, it actually preferentially takes up di and tripeptides faster than single amino acids. It seems counterintuitive, but it's true. And it's actually because they're regulatory signals and they want it to go ahead of the amino acids as substrate. So what I found is kind of hacking this is this 2 amino acid of leucine has about 60% more muscle protein synthesis gram for gram, 86% more leucine in the muscle, and 189% faster. So it's really the most powerful legal anabolic that you could possibly use.
And this one's already to market.
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely want to link to that one. I'm super curious about it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, I just had another. Oh, I hit you up on Instagram about this, but and I know a lot of my buddies are curious. We've had conversations about creatine. Like, give us the 411 on creatine.
In what way? Like, for what purpose?
I would say
best form, or like
definitely best form, and the benefits of, and obviously the downsides.
Yeah, I mean, the most acceptable answer in science and research that's like kind of said ad nauseum in the circles I'm in is, creatine monohydrate is the most trusted form. And really, like a German creatine like CreaPure is not going to have like the toxic solvents associated with some other sources of creatine monohydrate. So maybe that's the best source. But that said, like creatine is creatine, and really all of them are bioavailable. It just depends on the cost and your preference. I would say that other forms tend to go in solution better, like creatine HCl, the hydrochloride. It's a lot more bitter and lower in pH, but it goes in solution better. So if I was to use creatine monohydrate, I wouldn't like mix it into a shake or into, a beverage. I would take the creatine monohydrate, 3 to 5 grams a day is fine. I would just throw it back in my mouth and then wash it down.
Okay. So I usually do it with water in a shaker, but that's too diluted almost.
No, it's not diluted. It's that it's potentially not going to go into solution dissolve as well. So that it may just be at the bottom of the can, the bottle, the glass, or whatever.
Okay.
So a way to ensure that you get it all is to just throw it in your mouth and then kick it back with some fluid.
Okay.
But if you have creatine HCl, it does go into solution well. There's been a lot of different forms through the years, and none of them really outperform a standard creatine monohydrate. Maybe an interesting form could be a magnesium creatine chelate. They do have some synergy between the magnesium and the creatine. There may be some benefit to taking creatine with a high glycemic carbohydrate as far as its uptake and absorption. So having it with juice potentially or something like that could be ideal.
Okay. Benefits.
Benefits, like I was actually one of the first to write about this over almost 15 years ago when people were just talking about it for strength and power and anaerobic capacity. knowing that it is a powerful buffer. I was talking about benefits on vision, brain function, protecting bone, testes. There is so many places that creatine is, and it's also a great methylator in protecting DNA, like really helping protect us against aging. But I would say like one of the most exciting areas has been in protecting against traumatic brain injury and potentially being therapeutic in traumatic brain injury. So it may have a prophylactic effect and a therapeutic effect with traumatic brain injury. And we've shown there's a recent study that shown with a high dose of creatine, maybe it was, forget, it's somewhere in like the 5 to 20 gram range. Sorry if I can't remember, but maybe I needed creatine. But they didn't get enough sleep. And then they gave them the creatine. And the ones that got the creatine performed much better as a result and didn't feel as fatigued. So creatine is a powerful compound that I believe everyone should be using of any age, any gender. Everyone should be taking creatine daily.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Heads up on that. I heard you in the past speak about a bit about niacin with as it relates to NAD.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Where do you sit with that today?
Yeah, niacin, like especially the full flush one, the nicotinic acid. There's kind of ones that reduce the flush, also known as paresthesis, when you feel that tingle.
Yeah.
Like inositol hexanicotinate or niacinamide. Those forms I don't believe are quite as powerful, but are still beneficial. I believe the full flush niacin nicotinic acid is the most powerful at increasing NAD levels cellularly. Like there was a study where just, again, niacin at, it was large doses, like 500 milligrams twice a day, which is a lot and would definitely have you tingling.
Yeah.
They saw like 8x the NAD levels intramuscularly. So yes, there's things like NMN and NR and intravenous NAD, et cetera. But I do believe that nicotinic acid is probably the best. But if I wasn't to do that, and I was kind of scared of the whole flushing thing, I would probably do niacinamide and NMN together.
Okay.
Maybe there's a new form called NMNH that may be better still than NMN. I do think NMN is superior to NR.
Okay. And then if you were going to combine those two, how much of the niacin would you do?
Combining with
the NMN.
Yeah. Well, if it was a straight niacin, you can split out the doses. Like you don't have to be that scared of niacin. Like you could take like 100 milligrams 4 times a day or 5 times a day. And, you could work your doses up or like reduce the frequency. But, it makes sense to potentially split it out to take it with meals, things like that.
Okay. How long does the flush generally last?
It varies from person to person, but it does subside with continued use. But I would say on an average, like it might last like 30, 45 minutes.
Yeah. I did it years ago with the Stammet stack. And I thought it was pretty rad. And I think I was taking a decent amount.
Some people like it. It's kind of like
250.
Yeah, exactly. With his stack, it is. Some people like it. Like, depends. Like us kind of freaky biohackers like tend to like the experiential effect of it. Kind of like beta alanine, which is common in pre-workouts, has a paresthesia associated with it. And people like, I feel it working. Like I feel my pre-workout, kicking in. Like they like that aspect to it. And some people hate it.
Well, the last time I had it was in a drink, C4. And, look, I feel like I can handle most anything. Probably this sympathetic orientation towards most things. But I ended up drinking the whole thing, but about halfway through, I started to feel it. And like I was on the golf course and like, no offense to whoever created it, because I know who did, but I can't drink it. It was too intense for me. And so I don't, and again, maybe there was the caffeine in there too. I don't know exactly. There's a lot of stuff going on there. I'm like, I'm going to stick to the update. But when I saw you talking about the niacin, I'm like, maybe it's time to revisit that old friend and because I do, like a lot of people, I like to change the state and feel something different. So it might be, it might be something to play around with.
Mix it up.
Yeah. All right. Lastly.
All right.
Because I've been studying a bit of Dr. Jack Kruse's work. And he's big on blue
mitochondriac.
Light. He's a mitochondriac, blue light. Talk to me about blue light. Your kind of relationship to it, kind of the blue block, the blocking glasses.
Photobiomodulation, like we're meant to get light. It's really one of the most key triggers for our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake clock. We're getting away from exposure to light. Again, you might say that there's some narrative. A whole podcast could be available there on isolation and removing us from light and contact with each other, and removing our microbiome with sanitizers, on and on and on. I could go down that rabbit hole completely. But when you're exposed to this junk light, it's blocking the release of melatonin, right? And Dr. Sachin Panda's data is great around circadian rhythm. Food also, like when you eat, is blocking the release of melatonin as well. So you really should eat with your daylight window. And that means in the summer, maybe you have a longer window, and in the winter, a shorter window. So just eat during daylight hours. That's the way we're meant to eat. We wouldn't have been outside like somehow in the dark, like nocturnally, like somehow eating. Like that doesn't make sense. I believe, because I'm a blue-eyed individual, as are you, that I am much more sensitive to light. What I've noticed is that I get seasonal affective disorder, SAD, appropriately named, when I don't get enough blue light exposure in the morning during the day. Like if it's gray days, winter days, if I'm just inside a lot, I get really depressed real quick. So I actually have a light box from a company called Light Path that I love, that has blue and red light. And I can actually use the combination in the morning to turn on my circadian clock. And I feel like an incredible awakening. You have these photoreceptors that are in the corners of your eyes. And so sometimes I even put it on the side of my face, up pretty close. If I do that for 15 minutes, it will feel like I had an update or two.
Wow.
It's pretty intense. But also on the same end, you should, wear your blue light blocking glasses in the evening, like reduce exposure to junk light. Do the red light in the evening. This is helping you detoxify, reduce inflammation. If you've noticed, just when you look at a sunset or a sunrise, how you feel when you're getting exposed to that kind of light. There's also other light spectra that we don't really know about fully, but they're studying like green light in particular for pain. So we don't know like what everything's doing and what combination and when, but clearly one of the most important things is to just get light outside and create your vitamin D, et cetera. And I would argue that probably vitamin D biosynthesis is going to be correlated to your circadian rhythm too, because again, somatic connections, like everything's kind of wired together. I'm sure that is the case. I don't know that that's been shown, but I'm sure it's the case.
How committed are you to wearing the glasses at night? Do you wear glasses when you're like the yellow ones during the day when you're on a screen, or?
I'm not like, I wish maybe I was that disciplined, but I'm definitely not. Like I reduce the exposure on my phone and on my laptop. I have the night shift and all those different modes on, and in the evening I would wear like a orange lens. I don't go like with the red lens, and some of that's just a little too intense for me. But in the morning, I'm certainly not, and during the day, I'm not avoiding blue light. I need it. I need it so much. I don't need excess blue light like from a screen.
Okay.
I don't think that's healthy for your eyesight, but Red light in particular throughout the day is great, but blue light for me, certainly through the first half of the day, getting plenty of it is key. And then in the evening, starting to wind it down just like you would outside.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I think that covers most of what I was curious about for right now. But I'm sure you'll be back on in a couple months, and we'll have a lot more to talk about.
I'm here for the great unlearning.
Hell yeah, let's go. Well, thanks for being a big contributor to that, brother.
Yeah, man, this was fun.
Yeah, great having you.